Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. I am privileged and honored to have Dr. Thando from Dallas, Texas on our call today. We're talking about two really amazing subjects. One is burnout, which we see that happening so often in ministry and pastors. And the other is having a healthy identity and how do they go together. It's an incredible episode. I hope you enjoy it. And hey, let's jump into it. How can I serve you today, Thando?
Yes. Now, there's been something that's been very pertinent in terms of just leadership and pastoral leadership. And I'd love to just get a couple of, just some coaching on that. Now, The issue of burnout, PC, is very, very big when we look at just leadership burnout. I mean, just a few years ago, 72% of pastors were healthy. And that number has gone down from 2015 to 38%. And so there's a lot of just leadership burnout, and pastors are burning out a lot, have considered walking out of ministry. Leaders in departments are burnt out. Now, just to get a little bit of just some insight and guidance, what is burnout in terms of how you would just speak into that?
I love the question because I think it's more of a reality for pastors than ever before. You got pastors leaving the ministry. We hear pastors of suicide. It's a serious issue. I do think that the word burnout, though, I think is way too isolated to, when someone thinks burnout, they always think, oh, okay, the person's overworking, so they just need to get a better schedule and work a little less and, whatever, take some vacations and days off. And that's true. I think there's a component to that. But I think the problem personally in ministry, I think it's a lot larger than just the umbrella of burnout. I think it's a lot larger than the umbrella of burnout. I think it's more than that. I think the reasons are more than that. So, yeah, there may just be the simple, hey, I'm burned out. I need to take some time off. I need to get a better rhythm and schedule. I agree with that. But I think that we bring on some of that. Sometimes we can bring that on ourselves. One, when our identity is wrapped up in our title. If our identity is all wrapped up in what we do rather than who we are, I think that's going to be a big problem. One thing I always love to say when I'm coaching someone is tell me who you are without telling me what you do.
Right.
People have a hard time figuring that out because their identity is so wrapped up in it. And now here's the thing. Our identity is so wrapped up in our title. We don't want to let go of the title. And then we don't want to let go of speaking all the time or doing whatever we do in ministry all the time because our identity is wrapped up in that. And what if someone starts outshining us and does better in that? Then we get jealous and now our identity is, so we'll end up overworking. We'll end up doing more than we should. We'll end up not sharing the load because we're fearful of being outshined. But really, at the root of it is our identity is all wrapped up in what we do rather than who we are. And I think we also are guilty of wearing that burnout or that busyness as some badge of honor. Oh, I'm so busy. I do all this. I do all that. And it's a badge of honor to look how hard that I work. Look how much I do. And so when you start thinking of all these things, now you can get into physical health and you can get into all sorts of things. I know that we can, and I sure am not the expert. I do have one advantage that I talk to more pastors than most people do, and you start hearing commonalities. So I don't know if there's a science to what I'm saying as much as you start hearing the same thing over and over across America, and you're thinking, that's a problem. Yeah. Your identity is wrapped up in that. That's why you keep doing this. Your whole self-worth is wrapped up in this. That's why you keep doing it. So I think there's a side of burnout that is just the work part, but there's a side of identity. And I think that we allow people to create our guidelines rather than us creating them. Think about a church. They expect this. You got to be at every visit, hospital visit. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to counsel. You got to do everything. Look, if you don't create your own guardrails, everybody else is going to ignore them. and you have to create your own guardrails because everybody else is just going to throw them out. And just, this is what I do. This is what I can do. I think that the burnout comes when we don't set our guardrails and when we have an unhealthy view of our title, position, and identity. At least that's what I see. Now, that is not a science.
Right.
I think that someone that is more of a psychologist would have a bunch to say about this, and they're probably right. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, from talking to a lot of pastors, if we can get that under control, we'd probably remove a lot of that feeling that we have. If that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. It makes sense. And I'd like to give a follow-up question, especially on the context of identity. Now, do you feel that maybe the way the call is presented to say, well, I answered the call of God, I answered the call to serve, the call to lead. It's a call, I'm married to the ministry. Does that level of thinking perhaps create a context where the church is me, I am the church type thing?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of that is in that calling of being in the ministry, that calling to grow a church or whatever God has you doing. I think in that calling, we ignore the other call. The one thing I always love to say, Thando, is you are a priest to your home first. I think you're a priest to your home first. And that home means we have healthy relationships, we have healthy boundaries, we have healthy health. And in our quest for the call, we end up sacrificing where we are a priest first. And I see that a lot. Where one thing I love to say is success outside the home never compensates for failure within it. So you can have all the success you want outside the home, but it doesn't compensate for the failure that you're experiencing within the home. And you gotta be able to deal with that. And I think in that home isn't just your marriage and your kids, but it's who you are, it's your health, it's boundaries, it's guidelines, it's guardrails. I think it's all of those things. And yeah, I think you're 100% correct. That we allow the call to cause us to ignore the other things that God has called us to do and be as leaders and as leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then just a follow up on the other question, or rather on the other context in terms of just wearing business as a badge of honor,
Yeah.
wearing the fact that I'm the to-go-to person, everybody kind of comes to me. How do we overcome that? Because I've spoken to leaders, who are doing 3-4 hour long services, and then from there they sit for counseling for another 3-4 hours, and it's not sustainable. How do we get pastors to disconnect and know that there'll be another service? Even when Joshua, is at the end of his life, he says, well, I'm old, but there's still land to be taken. The need will always be there. How do we disconnect pastors to become healthy?
Oh, yeah. And so you're talking about like, hey, man, I keep working harder. I keep doing this. But there's so much need in front of me. And how do we stop and realize there's always going to be a need?
Yes.
Is that kind of it?
And how do I take care of myself? How do I rest in the context of feeding so that I am healthier? I still have more to feed people tomorrow, because we end up with an empty place.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Wayne Cadero wrote a great book, Leading on Empty. It's a great book. You got it. Yeah. Look at that. Now, if I mention one of my books, I bet that doesn't come out as fast. That really hurts, bro.
I have them too.
Yeah, hold on. You're using them as a coaster for your cup. That's what you're doing.
I love you, PC.
That's awesome. This is great. I think that you can't. Well, you can't lead from a place of being empty. You can't lead from a place of if the well is empty, there's no water to give. I mean, that's just a practical thought. Like, where are you filling up your cup? So I ask a pastor, okay, what's the devotional like time with the Lord? Right. Do you have a coach in your life that's pouring? I got a water bottle here. Do you got a coach that's pouring water into you so you can pour it into other people. If your devotional life's a mess, you're never spending time with the Lord. You're not getting coached and getting stretched. Who's your coach? I have a couple of them. I've had the same coaches for years. They're stretching me. They're growing me. If you don't have that going on in your life, you don't have anything to offer. And that's the first thing that I would say is that, man, you've got to have something to give. And in order, you can only give. One thing I've always said to people is you can't give what you do not have.
Right.
And so spiritually speaking, but then also very practically speaking, I've known a certain pastor where I'm like, man, it's been 5 years and I don't know if you're all that much of a better leader or that you know more. Are you growing more? Are you reading more? Who's coaching you? You got to have something to give.
Right.
And I think that comes from your spiritual place, from your own personal development. All that has to happen. It's not one or the other. Well, I got a good time with the Lord, but you're not growing as a leader. Well, I'm growing as a leader, but I don't have a good time with the Lord. I think both have to happen. I do understand like these, hey, we got these long services, and I did want to meet that. I did want to touch on that for a moment because you said the need will always be there. And that's a great line. The sick will always be among you. The hurting will always be among you. It's never going to leave.
Right.
But your ability to step back and say, okay, I'm back to being that priest of my home, like we said, the need's always there. There's one thing that people always say to me is, this is funny, when things calm down, then I'm going to get my life in order. Things aren't ever going to calm down.
No.
They're never. As soon as we get past this season, it'll be okay. No, it won't. There's always a new season. There's always new issues. There's always new challenges. There's always new goals and objectives. It never ends. The need's always there. Yeah. So when people say, as soon as this passes, I'll kind of get my life in order, you may as well forget that. Right. You got to get your life in order in the middle of the chaos because the chaos is never going to leave. And it'll always be there. I think it's organized chaos where it's like, man, I've got things going on. I'm growing. We're building a building. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're doing this. It's like, bro, if you can't get your life lined up in this time, you'll never get it lined up because there's never a time where it slows down. It's just always moving along. There's always issues. There's always needs. Always.
Wow.
Yeah.
The other thing that I realized, perhaps you can speak into that, is that a lot of leaders don't have somebody pouring into them. And so even mistakes where you could call me out and say, you know what, Thando, you could do things differently. There's nobody that then pours that. And sometimes maybe leaders may feel that it's almost, I'm reducing myself by having somebody speak into my life. How can leaders be helped? Because a lot of leaders could manage their energies better. How can they be helped just to understand that it's okay to sit at somebody else's feet?
Oh, to seek someone else's help?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have a coach over you, do you have somebody you are accountable to?
Oh, yeah. Man, I wish I could wave a magic wand and get all pastors to be hungry to learn because I don't think they are. They say they are. But then they don't follow through. Or, hey, I'm going to get the coaching, and then they never do. Or I'm going to get the development, and they never do. I'm going to have a mentor in my life, and they never do. They never get that. Now, I think everybody thinks they have a mentor because they're thinking of their former pastor. And he may be able to be a place of transparency for you. He may be able to be a place of prayer for you. But there's nobody pouring into your life to make you a better leader. That guy, I have people that I look at as mentors in my life, but honestly, they don't have a clue how to tell me how to grow a ministry. But they're really great people, and I need them in my life for that area of my life. But I got to have people that like, oh no, I know how to grow ministries. I know how to organize things. I know how to develop. I have to have both. I think we naturally have one because you just, hey, my former pastor or this old professor of mine, whatever. But we don't allow that. And I think the reason we don't allow, some people don't allow coaches in their life and people to speak into their life and to help them and grow their ministry I think there's a couple things. One, Bible says pride comes before a fall. I think your pride gets in the way, and then the fall is the organization doesn't grow, you don't grow, the church doesn't grow because you didn't get the help because you had too much pride to think I can do it on my own. And I think people do that. I think people are at that point where they're like, I can do it on my own. I got this. Humorously, I'll tell you this. There's a pastor that I know that he's really, really stuck, and I've known him for a long time. And I'm like, dude, just reach out to me. Let me see if I can help you. Forget, just forget the whole business side of church boom. Just let me help you. And, yeah. Finally, I just told him recently, bro, you're going to love this. I go, here's the bottom line. I'll call him Jimmy. Here's the bottom line, Jimmy. And he said, what is it? And I said, you could be on fire and I could have the only bucket of water and you still wouldn't ask for help. And I think so many people are like that. I'm like, just ask for help. Yeah. Your pride is what's keeping you from growing. But let's go even deeper. Your pride is keeping you from the church growing, which is causing a kingdom issue. So drop the pride and get the help. Right. Get the people that you need, get the coaching you need. Professionals get coached, amateurs learn by trial and error. Get the coach, get the help, get the people you need in your life. Because the pride is going to cause you to fall. I don't need it. I can figure it out on my own. That'll show that I'm weak. I was on the phone with a pastor quite a while back, buddy of mine. He's got a church of, 10, 12,000. And he goes, hey, man, I got to go. My personal coaching appointment is coming up. And I'm thinking in my mind, I got guys that are churches 100 and 200, and they won't seek out help. But here's a guy who's got 12,000 people in his church, and he's got a coach. Tell me what's wrong with that picture. It's like, come on, man, get the help you need. And you got to be willing to invest too. When I first got coaching years ago, our church where I'm the founding pastor, we couldn't afford it. And it personally cost me about well over $1,000 a month. This was years ago, and it was $1,000 a month. Now that would be $2,000 or $3,000 a month. But I personally went to my wife and I said, I need this coaching. And then the church was able to help with a little bit of it and blah, 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 blah. But there was a year and a half of my coaching where I was personally writing the check, which means I had to sacrifice. You got to invest, man. Quit thinking I can't afford it. You can't afford not to get the help that you need.
Wow.
So you got to get it. So I don't know, man. I just wish pastors would. Right. Here's the other thing I'll tell you. I'll tell you one more thing, is that we just started something called Church Boom University. And you can go to churchboom.org/university and sign up. It's $29 a month. But it was birthed out of this conversation. It's a place where people can get master classes and physical resources, and it's a great, great, great resource. Every pastor should be a part of it. Yeah. We're partnering with all sorts of pastors to get tons of free resources on there, books and all that for really, really cheap. But anyway, it was birthed out of this conversation when I was talking. I had the privilege and honor to sit with the legend and legacy, John Maxwell, have breakfast with him quite a while back. And I asked him this question. I said, hey, what's the difference between corporate leaders? Because that guy coaches, CEOs of Pepsi and Coca-Cola and Google and whatever else. He coaches all these guys, but then he also helps pastors and church leaders. Yeah. I said, what's the difference between lead pastors and leaders of big corporations? Thando, he didn't even hesitate. He literally just said, oh, it's really easy. And he said, the corporate leaders are much more hungry to learn than the pastoral leaders. And I'm like, and then I said, tell me a little, and then I go expand on that. He goes, they'll learn, they'll pay for it, they'll get the book, they'll go to the conference, they'll get the coaching, they'll do whatever they got to do to learn and grow. And he goes, pastors and leaders, he goes, I can practically throw the opportunity right in front of their mouth and they still won't take a bite. And I walked away from that, Thando, thinking, if anybody on the planet should be the hungriest leaders growing faster than any other leaders on the planet, it should be those that have the greatest mission on the planet. Right. This guy's selling cell phones or making syrup and water and calling it Pepsi, Like
Yeah.
they should not be more passionate about what they do than we are. They should not be more hungry as leaders and getting more coaching. We should be leading the way. That's why we created Church Boom University. I'm like, we got to create something to bring the
Yeah.
financial down as much as possible. That's where it was birthed from, because I walked away thinking we've got the greatest mission on the planet.
Yeah.
No one should be hungrier leaders, more developing leaders, more seeking help than those with the greatest mission on the planet. No one should be.
And
Man.
we are falling apart at the seams because we are not respecting the importance of learning. Even Jesus says, learn from me.
Yes.
I remember when I was at Bible college years ago, one of my professors said, I know you probably want to run out and go plant a church. Sit here for these years and learn, because when you are learning, you are earning the right to be heard. When you learn, you earn the right to be heard. And make your life journey a journey of continuous learning, because then that's how you remain relevant.
Yes.
I think a lot of us as pastors, as leaders, we're getting tired, we're falling apart at the seams, and the world is now starting to use the church as a statistic of what not to do, as a lesson, because we are falling apart and we don't even know what to do.
Man, that's good. Let me make sure I just caught that. You said that who's learning about what not to do?
Right. When you are learning, right, you are earning the right to be heard.
Right.
Right.
But you said that people are using churches as a study of what not to do. Say that
Oh
again.
yes. Oh yes.
I like that.
The world is using the church as a reference point, as a statistic of what not to do in leadership.
Wow. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we are not growing, we're not learning, and we're falling apart at the seams. We are now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The church is now a statistic for the world.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I just finished up my master's, and I remember coming across in leadership, and I remember coming across something where I was reading that, where I was like, same thing. I was thinking, are we becoming the study of what not to do? You kind of look at World War I and go, okay, that leader made that mistake, and you learn from it.
Yeah.
We're becoming the study of what not to do. Why? Because you got 84% of churches are in decline or plateaued. You've got 70% of all pastors feel inadequate. You're closing more churches than they're open. We're an amazing case study.
Yeah.
Of what not to do.
And the youth. So I was in Florida. My nephew signed up at one of the Christian colleges, and there's something that happened. So they announced the different faculties, right? Engineering, when students raised up their hands. Piloting, people stood up. Mathematicians, and then they said pastoring. It's a Christian school. Not one kid raised up their hand. Out of the 200 to 300 students that came into that international university, not one is signing up to be a pastor. We are becoming the statistic very, very quickly.
Yes.
Newsweek, Time Magazine, all of these are now referring to the church. And no wonder these young guys who are coming in are not even going to Bible college to become pastors.
Yep. I see that a lot too in universities. They're not that. It's just the pipeline is not there. And yeah, there's no doubt about that. And you are 100% correct. We've got to change that tide. It has to be.
It has.
Man, it has to be. So anyway, yeah, that's good, man. Good stuff. And anything else on your mind today? Anything else I can jump in and collaborate with you on?
No, thank you so much. I think perhaps just a final word of encouragement that you can give to a pastor who's struggling, a pastor who's just trying to figure things out. The weight of the call on one side, probably an identity that's misplaced. What would you say just to encourage that man?
Well, the one thing I would say I is about that is, as we wrap this up, we've talked a lot about. You've asked me a lot of questions about burnout and identity, and we've talked about all that. And there is, I do think that burnout and a lot of that comes down to identity. If I know who I am in Christ, if I'm not wrapped up in my title and all that, can you imagine someone being that confident? I don't see that person burning out. Now, again, I'm not the psychologist, but I've talked to a lot of pastors, and when you start hearing the same thing over and over, you're thinking, okay, there's a problem. There is something that I love teaching called the identity thermostat, which I think that pastors need to be aware of. An identity thermostat is like a thermostat on the wall. Matter of fact, I think that's a thermostat on your wall right behind you. And you're in Dallas, Texas, where it's always 195 degrees. And so if you walk over to your thermostat and say, okay, man, it's hot in here, and you push it and go 70 degrees, the idea is it's going to drop to 70 degrees, right? And as soon as it starts heating it up, it's going to push it back down to 70 degrees, or it's too, no matter what. Or if it's cold, it's going to bring it up to here. The thermostat keeps it at 70 degrees. Now, we have an identity thermostat. Now, here's what I mean. Is we can hear about burnout, we can read about burnout, we can listen to the podcast on burnout, we can talk about I can tell you that God's got a plan for your life and all that, but here's the bottom line. If you don't change the thermostat, no matter what we do for you, no matter what anybody does for you, it'll always stop right here. No matter what. So now watch this, we can heat it up out here, can't we? Oh man, hey, dude, go to this conference, read this book, get this coaching. Yeah, all that, we're trying to heat up your life and make it even bigger and better. Right. But no matter what, it always comes down to the thermostat. So you have to attack the identity thermostat. You got to bring it before the Lord. I think Peter, scripturally, the disciple Peter is the perfect example of that identity thermostat. He made the change. He made the change, not at age 12. He made the change as an adult, which it's harder to do that as an adult because you're more settled in your ways. Insecure. What's he do? He's so insecure, he got to chop the ear off of a soldier to say, look how great I am. I'll protect you, Lord. He's so insecure, even in Acts. He runs up and beats everybody else, or in Acts, in John 21, beats everyone else to the ocean to the shore to make the breakfast with Jesus. He's constantly trying to prove himself to Jesus. I got your back. I'll chop off the ear of a soldier. I'm the first one at the breakfast in John 21. But in Acts, now he's referred to as the person who's turned the world upside down.
Right.
How did he go from here to here? There was an identity, something changed in his identity thermostat. Wow. You got to tap into your identity thermostat because Peter is this insecure, neurotic disciple that's always trying to prove himself, always got to be out in front, got to show that he's the man, got to show that he's better than anybody else, shoves himself into the front of the disciple line. But then in Acts, he's a totally different person. Because the identity thermostat changed. Something changed in his identity thermostat. And I look at it and I think, man, there was something that changed. And I love that Jesus recognized it in John 21.
Right.
Do you remember the conversation, Thando, when Jesus says, hey, Peter, do you love me?
Yeah.
And he says, Lord, you know that I love you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever studied that, but when he says, do you love me? That was the agape kind of love.
Right.
When Peter responded in the Greek, he said, you know I love you. It was phileo love.
Wow.
Totally two different words.
Yeah.
So Jesus says to Peter, do you agape me? Oh, Lord, you know I phileo you.
Yeah. It's not the same.
It's not the same. Because he was having a struggle with his identity. He's having a struggle with the mistakes he made. He was having a struggle with not being there, with the whole issue at the cross, with denying him, chopping ears off, all that. He had an identity crisis from the word go. And then Jesus says a second time, do you agape me?
Yeah.
Peter says, Lord, you know I phileo you.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting part, Thando. Jesus says one more time. Jesus, on the third time, changes the verb.
Right.
Now, Jesus says on the third one, he says, do you phileo me? He brings it down. He meets Peter right where he's at, and he says, Lord, you know I phileo you. I brotherly love you. He meets him right where he's at. I want to encourage every pastor that's listening to it. Jesus is going to come and meet you right where you're at, with your mistakes, with your hangups, with your burnouts, with your faults, and he's going to bring you up to the Peter that we find in Acts. Woo! That's what I would say, brother.
Thank you.
Hey, brother, it's so good talking with you, man. It is always great talking with you, Thando. You got an amazing heart, and you're an incredible leader, and it's really great talking with you. Thanks for being on today, man.
I appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
All right. Bless you, dude. Love you. Thank you for tuning in to the Fly on the Wall podcast. We hope today's episode provided you with some practical steps to lead your church to the next level. If you found this episode helpful, take a moment to leave us a review and share it with others. Remember, when the pastor grows, the church grows, and we grow pastors. We love you. We're your raving fans, and we are cheering you on. See you next week.